She told me I couldn't have a child. What I did next quieted the entire room. Emotional hook. Can you imagine being told the nursery you built for your lost baby, the one you'd never get to hold, was simply going to waste? That's what she said to me. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a dagger to my soul. That was the moment everything shattered, and my life, as I knew it, burned to the ground. Start a story. For 8 years, I thought I had a partner, a husband who loved me. But then, 2 months before this all unfolded, my world crumbled. I suffered my third miscarriage at 31 agonizing weeks. I won't go into the raw details because even now the memory breaks me. But you need to understand that searing pain, that hollow ache, to truly grasp what happened next. Just 2 months before that, my sister-in-law showed up on our doorstep, pregnant, heartbroken, and completely alone. Her boyfriend wanted nothing to do with the baby, and she had nowhere else to turn. My husband and I didn't hesitate. We opened our home, my home, the one I'd bought myself before we were even married, a decision I made with a truly open heart. The first few weeks, I tried to be there for her. I understood she was hurting. I sat with her for hours, just holding her while she cried. We watched our favorite shows, ate ice cream until we couldn't move. I honestly thought we were bonding. I thought I was helping her navigate one of the hardest times of her life. But then things shifted. Slowly, subtly, then rapidly. I take pride in keeping a clean home, but she clearly didn't share that value. Her clothes were everywhere. Dirty dishes appeared in random rooms. She even left incredibly personal items on our living room table, things no guest should ever see. I tried to handle it gently, privately, before involving my husband. I pulled her aside, and she immediately burst into tears, promising she'd be cleaner. I hugged her, told her it was okay, but that this was a clear boundary for me. She swore it wouldn't happen again. It got worse, much worse. She started telling me she expected me to do her laundry, wash her dishes, clean her room daily, simply because she was pregnant. I understood pregnancy was difficult, truly, but I simply couldn't allow myself to feel like a maid in my own home. Not after everything I'd just been through, not after losing my baby. I finally told my husband, and his reaction, it absolutely floored me. He actually told me she was going through a lot and that we should be helping her. And then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said, and I quote, "Taking care of someone who is pregnant might make you feel better." I didn't even know how to respond. I just kept my mouth shut, swallowed the bitter pill, and tried to move forward. I work full-time from home, and my husband works brutal 12-hour shifts, so I was doing everything alone. Every single time I dared to ask her for help, she had an excuse, even if she was just glued to the couch, binging TV. One day, I went out and bought myself a specific food. It was something I had finally been able to enjoy eating again after my loss. I wrote my name on it, put it in the fridge, and directly asked her not to touch it. When I went back later, it was gone. She had eaten it. My husband, when I confronted him, told me I was being selfish, that life was about sacrifices. I looked at him and said it felt like I was living with the worst roommates on the internet. He did not take that well. Then came the day that completely broke me. My sister-in-law, without a single word to me, planned a baby shower at my house. She invited strangers into my home. My husband, bless his heart, urged me to go. He said it would hurt our relationship if I didn't. So I went. Halfway through the party, my husband and his sister announced they wanted to show everyone the nursery. My heart stopped. What nursery? What room had she claimed? They led everyone upstairs, and that's when the horrifying realization hit me like a physical blow. They were walking toward my baby's room, the nursery I had built for the child I lost. I followed them, numb, up the stairs. And there they were, a crowd of people standing in my baby's room, gushing to her about what a beautiful job she had done setting it up. My setup, my crib, my decorations, for my baby that I would never, ever hold. The sobs came first, raw and uncontrolled. But then, that gut-wrenching sadness transformed. It became something else entirely. Fury. I started yelling. I told her she was the foulest, most despicable person I had ever met. For everything she had put me through, for making me feel like a servant in my own home, for stealing the one sacred space I had left of my child. I turned to my husband. His jaw was hanging open. His entire family was staring at me, a silent, judging chorus. I looked back at my sister-in-law, my voice trembling, and asked her how she could do this, how she could take my nursery, my baby's nursery, and act like it was hers. What she said next, it brought me to my knees. She looked me dead in the eyes, without a flicker of remorse, and said, "It's not my fault you couldn't produce a child." And then, as if that wasn't enough, she added, "You're selfish for letting it go to waste." The entire room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. My husband tried to help me up, but I recoiled, pulled away from his touch. I stood there, on legs that shook so hard I thought I'd collapse, and looked him directly in the face. My voice, though shaking, was clear. "Pick," I told him. He just stared, frozen. I said it again, louder this time, demanding, "Pick me or her?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Not a single word. I looked at him for what felt like an eternity, waiting for an answer that never came. Then, I pushed past his stunned family and walked out of that room. I haven't spoken to either of them since. I drove straight to a hotel, the only place I could think of. Going back to that house felt like drowning. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just staring at the steering wheel before I finally went inside and got a room. The clerk asked if I needed help with luggage, and it hit me. I had nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. I paid cash, went upstairs, and just sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything except this strange, buzzing static in my head. When morning finally came, I was still sitting there in the same position. I got up, drove to a coffee shop, but didn't go inside. Instead, I opened the notes app on my phone and started typing. Everything. Every single thing they had done to me. The dirty dishes left in my bedroom. The laundry piled in the hallway. The food with my name on it that disappeared. The chilling way my husband told me caring for his pregnant sister might make me feel better about losing my baby. I wrote for an hour, my hands shaking so hard I could barely type. The grief came in waves, like it always did, but underneath it, something else was brewing. Something cold. Sharp. Clear. I looked at that list, and it hit me. I had been a complete doormat in my own house. I pulled up my messages and texted Lily, my best friend, asking if I could stay with her for a while. She responded in under 2 minutes, already making up her guest room. Lily picked me up from the hotel lobby and, without saying a single word, just hugged me. She held me for a full minute, right there in front of the check-in desk, and I felt something crack open in my chest. We drove to her apartment, and when we got there, she showed me a corner desk she'd set up, my laptop already plugged in. She told me to take all the time I needed, and then she left me alone. I sat down and opened a new document. I typed everything. The exact timeline of when his sister moved in, when things changed. The specific dates I bought food that got eaten. The day I found dirty underwear on my coffee table. The nursery. What she said about me not being able to produce a child. I documented every single conversation with my husband where he chose her over me. Every time he told me I was being dramatic or selfish. By evening, I had 12 single-spaced pages, filled with dates, details, and quotes I could still hear in my head. Lily came in with tea and asked if she could read it. I handed her the laptop and watched her face as she scrolled. Her jaw got tighter and tighter until I thought she might actually crack a tooth. When she finished, she looked at me and asked, very simply, "What are you going to do?" I looked her right back and said, "I'm going to make them leave my house." My husband started calling that night. I let it go to voicemail. He called again an hour later, and I let that one go too. By the next morning, he had called 8 times and left 6 messages. I listened to them in order. The first one was apologetic, saying we needed to talk, that he understood I was upset. The second was similar. But by the 4th message, his tone had completely changed. He sounded frustrated, asking why I was being so dramatic. The fifth reminded me that his sister was pregnant and vulnerable, and that I was making everything worse by disappearing. The sixth message said his family was worried about me and thought my grief was making me act crazy. I deleted all of them, and then I blocked his number. But he showed up at Lily's apartment on the third day. I heard him knocking, then pounding on the door. Lily asked if I wanted her to call the police, but I said no. I went downstairs and met him in the parking lot. He immediately launched into it, talking about how I had embarrassed him in front of his entire family, how his mother was crying, how his sister was devastated, how I had ruined what should have been a happy day. I let him talk for 5 minutes, just letting him rant. Then, I asked him one question. Did you think what your sister said to me was acceptable? He stopped mid-sentence, staring. I asked again. He opened his mouth and, unbelievably, said, "She was just upset, and you shouldn't have yelled at a pregnant woman." That was it. That was the moment. My marriage was over. I knew it with a certainty that chilled me to the bone. 4 days after that dreadful baby shower, I met with Laura Wallace. Lily had recommended her, even made the appointment for me. I brought my meticulously documented timeline and the deed to my house, which clearly showed I'd bought it 3 years before we got married. Laura was maybe 50, with her gray hair pulled back and sharp eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She read through my timeline without speaking, then reviewed the deed. When she looked up, she told me, calmly, professionally, that the house was my separate property because I had purchased it before marriage. That meant I had every legal right to remove both my husband and his sister from my home. She explained I needed to follow proper eviction procedures to avoid complications, but the law was clearly on my side. I asked how long it would take, and she said 30 days minimum. I asked what would happen if they refused to leave, and she said we could get the police involved if necessary. Hearing her say all of this in her calm, professional voice made me feel powerful for the first time in months. I signed the paperwork to retain her and walked out of her office with my head held high. I went back to the house the next day to get more clothes. I used my key and walked in, and there she was, my sister-in-law, lounging on my couch, eating my ice cream, watching television. She looked up when I came in and had the audacity to tell me I owed her an apology for ruining her baby shower. I just stared at her for a long moment. She was wearing one of my sweatshirts, eating my ice cream, sitting on my couch in my house, acting like she had done nothing wrong. I walked over and stood directly in front of the television. Very calmly, I told her she had 30 days to find somewhere else to live because I was evicting her. The shock on her face was so complete, she actually dropped her spoon onto the couch. It left a dark chocolate stain on the cushion. My husband came running down the stairs, demanding to know what I had just said. I repeated it, looking him dead in the eye. 30 days. Both of you. Get out of my house. He started yelling, asking how I could possibly kick out a pregnant woman with nowhere to go. I pulled the eviction notice from my purse and handed it to him. He read it, and his face went absolutely white. I grabbed my clothes from the bedroom and left them standing there, stunned, in what was still, unequivocally, my house. Over the next week, I went through my credit card statements. My gut told me something was off. And there it was. Charges on my Amazon account I didn't recognize. Baby items. Hundreds of dollars worth. I pulled up the order history and saw it clearly. My sister-in-law had been using my account to buy things for herself. Diapers, bottles, clothes, a breast pump. She had been charging everything to my card without even asking. I felt sick looking at the total. Laura recommended her husband, Theodore, a forensic accountant. I sent him my statements, and he called me back 2 days later. He had found over $2,000 in unauthorized charges, going back 6 weeks. Some of the orders had been placed while I was at work, in the same house. She had been in my home, using my computer, to steal from me. I called my husband and told him what I found. His response? He said I should have talked to him first instead of going through our finances like some kind of detective. I hung up on him immediately and forwarded everything to Laura. Ryder Tucker, my husband's older brother, showed up at Lily's apartment without warning. I had always thought he was reasonable. Lily answered the door, then came to get me, looking annoyed. Ryder asked if we could talk privately. Lily told me I didn't have to, and I knew she was right, but I agreed anyway. We went to a park a couple of blocks away and sat on a bench. He spent 20 minutes telling me his sister had always been troubled, that she made bad choices, that she had a hard life, and family was supposed to stick together no matter what. He said I was being selfish for not understanding how hard pregnancy was for her. I listened, without interrupting. When he finally stopped talking, I just mentioned what his sister had said to me about not being able to produce a child. Ryder actually waved his hand like he was brushing away a fly. He said I was taking it too personally, that grief was making me irrational, and I needed to think about the baby who needed a stable home. I stood up. I just walked away while he was still talking. I heard him calling after me, but I didn't turn around. Laura served the formal eviction notices by process server. Official documentation. My husband called me from a number I didn't recognize and started screaming before I could even say hello. He said I was tearing the family apart, that I was destroying his sister's life when she was about to have a baby, that I was a cruel, heartless person who cared more about a house than about family. I waited until he stopped yelling, a calm washing over me. Then I told him he had multiple chances to choose me. Every single time, he chose her instead. Now, he got to live with that choice somewhere that was not my house. He started to say something else, but I hung up. He called back 3 more times. I didn't answer. My sister-in-law posted on social media the next day. Lily showed me. It was a long, dramatic post about how her cruel sister-in-law was kicking out a pregnant woman with nowhere to go. How she had opened her home with love and been repaid with hatred. How some people let grief turn them into monsters. Several of my husband's family members shared it, with comments about how sad it was and how they were praying for her. The post got maybe 40 likes from people who had no idea what truly happened. I wanted to respond, to tell everyone the truth, to scream it from the rooftops. But Lily said not to engage. She took screenshots of everything and sent them to Laura, just in case we needed evidence later. I read the comments and saw people calling me heartless, cruel, and worse. But I reminded myself, none of them were there when she took over my baby's nursery. None of them heard what she said to me. Their opinions meant absolutely nothing. I made an appointment with Ivy Newton, a therapist specializing in pregnancy loss. Lily had found her, swore she was really good. I went to her office, a small, peaceful building downtown with plants in the windows. Ivy was younger than I expected, with kind eyes and a soft voice. She asked me to tell her about my baby. For the very first time since the miscarriage, I talked about the nursery. How I had painted every wall myself, a pale, soothing blue. How I spent hours arranging the stuffed animals on the shelves. How I bought a rocking chair and would sit in it, imagining holding my baby. How I had picked out books to read and tiny clothes that would now never be worn. Ivy listened without interrupting. When I got to the part about finding strangers in that room, telling my sister-in-law what a good job she did, I started to sob. Ivy handed me tissues and waited. I told her about losing my baby and then losing my marriage, all in the span of 2 months. She didn't tell me I was overreacting. She didn't tell me I needed to forgive anyone. She said grief and anger could live together in the same space, and both were valid. When I left her office, I felt utterly exhausted, but somehow lighter. Like someone had finally given me permission to feel everything I had been holding back. 2 weeks later, I called a locksmith and met him at my house while my husband was at work. The locksmith was an older man, asked no questions, just changed every single lock on every door in under an hour. I paid him cash and watched him drive away. Then I drove to a hardware store and bought a security camera system, doorbell camera, 2 outdoor cameras. I installed the doorbell camera myself, following the instructions on my phone. It took me almost 3 hours because I kept messing up the wiring, but I got it working. When I tested it, I could see my front porch clearly on my phone screen. I took photos of the new locks and the camera system and sent them to Laura. She texted back, telling me I did the right thing and to keep my phone charged in case anything happened. That night, I stayed at my house for the first time in 2 weeks. I walked through every room, making sure nothing was missing or damaged. Everything looked the same, but it felt different. Knowing they couldn't just walk in anymore. I made dinner in my kitchen and ate it at my table, and it felt like reclaiming something that had been stolen. Around 10:30, I was getting ready for bed when my phone started buzzing with alerts from the doorbell camera. I opened the app and there he was, my husband, standing on my porch. He was pressing the doorbell over and over. Then he started pounding on the door with his fist. I could hear him yelling through the door, asking what I had done, demanding I let him in. My hands started shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I grabbed my keys and my purse and ran out the back door to my car. I drove to Lily's apartment, going 15 miles over the speed limit the whole way. When I got there, I was shaking so hard I could barely unlock my phone to call her. She opened her apartment door before I could even knock and pulled me inside. My husband showed up 20 minutes later. I heard him pounding on Lily's door, yelling that I couldn't lock him out of his own home. Lily told me to stay in the guest room and not come out. I sat on the bed, my knees pulled up to my chest, listening to him yell. Then I heard Lily on the phone with the police, giving them her address, telling them someone was trying to break into her apartment. My husband kept yelling until I heard sirens outside. Then everything went quiet. Lily came into the guest room and sat next to me on the bed. She told me the police were talking to him outside and that I was safe. We sat there for another hour until her phone rang. It was one of the police officers, asking to speak with me. I took the phone with shaking hands. The officer told me my husband had been informed that he was legally evicted from property he did not own. The officer said if my husband continued harassing me or trying to enter the house, he would be arrested for trespassing. I thanked the officer and hung up. Lily made me tea, and I sat on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, until almost 3 in the morning. My phone buzzed with a text message from my husband. It was long, and I had to scroll to read all of it. He said he had rented an apartment for himself and his sister, and they would be out by the deadline. He said I had destroyed our marriage, and his family would never forgive me. He said I was cruel and heartless, and he hoped I was happy with what I had done. I read the message 3 times, looking for any sign that he understood why I was doing this. Looking for any acknowledgement of what his sister had said to me in that room. Looking for any apology for choosing her over me, again and again. There was nothing. Just blame. And anger. All directed at me for refusing to let them treat me like garbage in my own house. I blocked his number and turned off my phone. The next morning, Lily made me breakfast, and we sat at her kitchen table, not talking much. My phone was still off. I didn't want to see any more messages or deal with any more drama. Around noon, Lily got a call from someone we both knew from high school. The person told Lily that my husband's family had been holding meetings about me. They were discussing my mental state and whether my grief had made me unstable. My husband's mother had apparently told people I needed to be committed for psychiatric evaluation. When Lily told me this, I felt something snap inside my chest. They were using my dead baby against me. They were twisting my grief into a weapon to make me look crazy so they could justify what they had done. I had to sit down on the floor because I thought I might pass out. The rage was so strong, I could taste it in my mouth like metal. Lily helped me up and made me drink water. Then she called Laura and put her on speakerphone. Laura told me this was a common tactic in bad separations. She said people try to paint the other person as mentally unstable to gain sympathy or legal advantage. She told me to document everything they said and everyone who repeated it in case we needed evidence later. She said to save text messages and social media posts and write down dates and times of phone calls. I spent the rest of that day making notes in my phone about every conversation, every interaction since the baby shower. Lily sat with me the whole time, bringing me food I barely ate. That night, I finally turned my phone back on. There were 6 missed calls from my husband and 3 voicemails. I deleted them without listening. 3 days later, my husband called from a different number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. He told me his sister was in labor. She was 3 weeks early, but the doctor said the baby was fine and it was safe. He asked me to come to the hospital because his sister was asking for me. I said, absolutely not. I told him she made her feelings about me clear when she said I couldn't produce a child. He said I was proving his family right about me being heartless. I hung up and immediately called Ivy. She answered, even though it was after her normal hours. I told her everything that had happened and how I felt guilty for not going to the hospital, even though I knew deep down I shouldn't go. Ivy reminded me that showing up would only tell them they could treat me however they wanted, and I would still be there for them. She said boundaries are not cruel, and protecting myself was not heartless. We talked for almost an hour, and by the end, I felt steadier. The baby was born that night, a girl. My husband sent me a photo the next morning with a message saying I was missing out on being an aunt because of my stubbornness. I looked at the photo of my sister-in-law holding her daughter in the hospital bed, the very same hospital where I had delivered my stillborn baby just 2 months earlier. I looked at the baby's face and waited to feel something. Sadness, or anger, or jealousy, or anything. But I felt nothing for her except a distant hope that she would be a better mother than she was a houseguest. I deleted the photo and texted Ben Clark, a divorce attorney, asking if he had time to meet with me that week. He responded within an hour, saying he could see me the next day. I met Ben at his office, in a tall building downtown with marble floors. He was younger than I expected, with a kind face and a firm handshake. I showed him my deed and explained that my husband was trying to claim he deserved half the house value, even though I bought it before we got married. Ben reviewed my paperwork and told me my case was very clear. The house was my separate property, and my husband had no legal claim to it. He said we would file the proper documentation to protect the house in the divorce proceedings, and my husband's attorney would have no grounds to argue. Relief washed over me, so strong I almost cried right there in his office. 2 weeks later was moving day. I drove to my house with Lily beside me for moral support. My husband's car was already in the driveway, along with a small moving truck. I walked in through the front door, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Nobody spoke. My husband and his sister were packing boxes in the living room. My sister-in-law had the baby in a carrier, strapped to her chest. She kept turning so I could see the baby's face, clearly expecting some kind of reaction from me. I ignored her completely. I walked past them and started checking rooms, making sure they weren't taking anything that belonged to me. I found my husband in the kitchen, packing dishes. He looked at me, but said nothing. I watched him tape up a box and carry it outside. This went on for 2 agonizing hours. They packed and carried boxes while I followed them around, a silent sentinel, making sure they only took what was theirs. My sister-in-law kept positioning herself in my line of sight, the baby always facing me. I ignored her completely. When they were loading the last boxes into the truck, my husband turned to me. He said he hoped I was happy now that I had driven away everyone who loved me. I looked him in the eyes, my voice steady, and told him, people who loved me would never have violated my grief the way you both did. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something else, but then just shook his head and walked away. They drove off 20 minutes later. I stood in my driveway, watching the moving truck disappear around the corner. Then I went back inside my house. Lily was waiting in the living room. I walked through every room slowly. The kitchen where my sister-in-law had eaten my food without asking. The living room where she had left her mess everywhere. The guest room where she had lived for 4 months. Everything looked normal. Then I walked upstairs and opened the door to the nursery. The room was completely, utterly empty. They had taken everything. The crib I had assembled piece by piece. The decorations I had chosen so carefully. The rocking chair I had saved money for months to buy. The stuffed animals I had arranged on the shelves. The books I had picked out to read to my baby. The mobile that played soft music. The changing table. The tiny clothes in the dresser. Everything I had bought for my baby was gone. All that was left was the pale blue paint on the walls and the growth chart stickers I had put up, measuring heights my child would never reach. I sat down on the floor in the middle of that empty room. My chest felt tight, my throat closed up. I started crying harder than I had cried since the miscarriage. Lily came in and sat down beside me on the floor. She didn't say anything. She just held my hand and let me cry. We sat there for a long, long time until I had no tears left. Laura filed for legal separation the next week, with a clear path to divorce. The paperwork cited irreconcilable differences and included all the documentation of the financial exploitation and emotional abuse I had experienced. My husband's attorney tried to claim he deserved half the house value, despite it being my separate property. Ben Clark shut that down immediately with a deed and purchase records showing I had bought the house 3 years before we got married. The legal process moved faster than I expected, mostly because I had been so meticulous with my documentation. Every receipt, every text message, every email, every credit card statement. Laura told me this was one of the clearest cases she had handled in terms of property rights. 2 weeks into the separation, I got a letter from my husband's attorney. Inside was a settlement offer. My husband would waive any claim to the house in exchange for me not pursuing the credit card fraud charges against his sister. I read it twice, trying to comprehend what it meant. Then I called Laura, and she explained it. My husband had been scared all along that I would press charges. That was why he had been so aggressive and defensive. He was protecting his sister from legal consequences. I asked Laura what she thought I should do. She said it was my choice, but that signing the agreement would end things faster and get them out of my life completely. I thought about it for 2 days. Part of me, the furious part, wanted to press charges just to make them face consequences for what they had done. But a bigger part of me, the part that was utterly exhausted, just wanted them gone. I signed the agreement. Not because I forgave anything, but because I desperately wanted my life back. Laura assured me this was a smart choice, not a moral failing. 3 months after I walked out of that baby shower, the divorce was finalized. I got the notification on my phone while I was sitting at my desk, working. I was legally free from a marriage that had stopped being a partnership long before his sister moved in. I kept the house and my retirement accounts, everything I had brought into the marriage. He took his belongings and the crushing debt from supporting his sister. I stood in my kitchen that afternoon, holding the finalized papers in my hands. I felt exhausted and sad, yes, but also incredibly relieved. Like I had been holding my breath underwater for months and had finally come up for air. About 3 weeks after the divorce papers came through, I got a text from Ryder. He asked if we could meet for coffee, said he needed to tell me something important. I almost deleted it without responding, but something in the phrasing made me pause. I agreed to meet him at a public coffee shop near my house, somewhere I could leave quickly if I needed to. He showed up looking incredibly uncomfortable and started talking before I even sat down. He told me he felt bad about how everything happened and that he needed me to know something. My husband, he said, had been complaining to their entire family about my miscarriages for years. He called them inconvenient and expensive. He told his siblings that dealing with my grief was exhausting and that he wished I would just get over it. Ryder said their sister's cruelty at the baby shower wasn't random or isolated. She was repeating things my husband had been saying privately for a long time. I sat there holding my coffee cup and realized I wasn't even surprised. His impatience with my grief suddenly made perfect sense. His suggestion that caring for his pregnant sister might make me feel better wasn't kindness. It was pure dismissal. His immediate defense of her over me wasn't about family loyalty, but about protecting someone who shared his actual, bitter feelings. Hearing it confirmed still hurt, though. It hurt in a deep, old way that made my chest tight. I thanked Ryder for telling me and left without finishing my coffee. I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. The next month, I started reclaiming my house, room by room. I repainted the living room a warm gray color that felt nothing like the beige my husband preferred. I rearranged furniture so the space flowed differently. I bought new throw pillows and curtains that matched my taste, instead of compromises we'd made together. Lily came over most weekends to help me, and we turned the work into something almost fun. We'd blast music, eat takeout, and she'd make me laugh when I started feeling sad about erasing 8 years of shared space. The hardest room was, of course, the nursery. Lily helped me take down the growth chart stickers one by one, and I let myself cry while we worked. I wasn't just grieving my babies anymore. I was grieving the future I'd imagined with a partner who turned out to be someone completely different from who I thought he was. We painted the room a soft green and set up a desk and bookshelves. I bought a comfortable chair and a lamp that gave good light for working. Ivy told me during our next session that this was healthy processing. She said I was allowed to mourn multiple losses at once, and that turning the nursery into something useful was not a betrayal of my babies. The house started feeling like mine again instead of a space haunted by their presence. Some days I walk through the rooms and feel actual peace, instead of just absence. Through mutual friends, I hear that my sister-in-law's boyfriend has resurfaced and wants to be involved with the baby. Apparently, this creates major drama because he wants custody time and she doesn't trust him. I hear about arguments and lawyers and scheduling conflicts, and I realize, with a strange sense of detachment, that I don't care at all what happens to her. My husband is apparently struggling with the financial reality of supporting his sister and her child on a single income. He had to move to a smaller apartment. He's working overtime constantly. There's a petty, almost satisfying part of me that feels happy watching him face consequences for his choices. These complications ripple out in ways I didn't control when I enforced my boundaries. I am at peace with that, though. The alternative was drowning in their dysfunction and losing myself completely. I made the right choice, even if it was the hardest thing I have ever done. 6 months after everything fell apart, I am sitting in my home office, working on a project, when I realize I have gone a full hour without thinking about any of them. It feels like a milestone worth noting. I still see Ivy every other week and probably will for a long time. Grief over my babies doesn't have an expiration date. 3 miscarriages leave scars that don't heal neatly or on any predictable timeline. But my house is mine again. My life is my own. I am not happy exactly, because I am a divorced woman mourning children I will never hold. But I am surviving. Some days, that is enough. The family I chose matters more than the family I married into. Lily has been there for every hard moment. She helped me pack boxes and paint walls and cry in empty rooms. I am building something new from the wreckage, one careful day at a time. It is smaller than what I imagined, but it is real, and it is mine. Call to action. This journey has been heartbreaking, empowering, and utterly exhausting. I had to choose myself. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family, even when it felt impossible? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.